Tonight's big stories. National Security Council's Jonathan Malaya says the pile of dead corals on the Sandy Cays near Pagasa may be an attempt to create a new low tide feature in the area, thereby reversing the 2016 arbitration ruling. Repair works on two main thoroughfares along EDSA, the Magallanes flyover and the Guadalupe Bridge, are all set to start this month. What's the plan to make sure they don't worsen traffic? We'll ask that question to DPWH Secretary Manuel Bonoan.
And President Bongbong Marcos is certifying as urgent proposed amendments to the rice tarification law in an effort to bring down prices.
Good evening. Welcome to the show. I'm Regina.
I'm Gretchen. And I'm Shawn.
President Marcos says we will not retaliate and use water cannons on China, ruling it out as an offensive use of equipment.
That's even after Chinese Coast Guard water cannoned the Philippine Coast Guard boat last week, bending its steel railing and damaging the canopy. They also damaged a BFAR, or Bureau of Fisheries and Aquatic Resources boat that was delivering food and supplies to fisherfolk.
Instead, the government is hoping Beijing will respond to another round of high-level diplomatic talks. Maricel Halili with the report.
Despite being subjected to a series of maritime aggression from China, President Bongbong Marcos says the country will not resort to using water cannons as well.
We will not follow the Chinese Coast Guard and the Chinese vessels down that road. What we are doing is defending our sovereign rights and our sovereignty in the West Philippine Sea. And we have no intention of attacking anyone with water cannons or any other such offensive, I would have to call them weapons dahil nakaka-damage na.
In an interview on The Big Story last week, Philippine Coast Guard spokesperson Commodore J. Tariela highlighted China's use of very fatal water cannon pressure. Tariela, however, said despite this observation, they still did not see the need to use water cannons in return. President Marcos also said today that his government will continue to address issues in the West Philippine Sea through diplomatic channels.
All we do is pagka nangyayari, water cannon yung mga barko natin, ay nagpapadala tayo ng demarche, nagpapadala tayo ng sulat sa China and the other stakeholders. So that would be the opposite of what we are trying to achieve, would be to put any kind of cannon on our ships.
The president's sister, Senator Amy Marcos, also thinks that the Philippines should revisit dialogue with all concerned parties, including its ASEAN neighbors. Amy chairs the Senate Committee on Foreign Relations, and there is a resolution calling for a probe on the so-called gentleman's agreement that was recently filed.
It's ideal to operate from and negotiate from a position of strength. Wala naman strength na maipakita, puro maanghang lang na salita. Wala naman tayong mga armas. Let's continue dialogue with everyone, particularly with the ASEAN. The first round of defense are our neighbors, and I think it's very clear Indonesia, Malaysia, Singapore, Vietnam are reaping advantages without antagonizing or angering China.
While issues in the West Philippine Sea remain hot, the National Security Council is hoping for China to accept the Philippines' invitation for another round of bilateral consultations in order to sort through what needs to be discussed. For News 5, Maricel Harili, We Are One News.
Also, over the weekend, the Chinese embassy in the Philippines put out statements claiming that the Philippines' top defense and security officials had agreed to a supposed new model for managing the dispute in Ayungin Shoal. Now, they all denied it, with National Security Advisor Eduardo Año even calling it desperation. Mobile journalist Mary Mon Reyes has the details on that.
On Saturday, a spokesperson of the Chinese embassy in the Philippines made the claim that the Western Command of the AFP made an agreement with Beijing on a, quote, new model for the management of the situation in Ayungin Shoal. The deal was supposedly made earlier this year with the goal of de-escalating tensions in the West Philippine Sea. China even claimed that this new agreement was approved by Defense Secretary Guibo Chodoro and National Security Advisor Ed Año. China asserts that this new model establishes guidelines for the two sides to interact with each other in Ayungin. The embassy added that the success of a Philippine resupply mission in February is owed to this agreement. But just the day after China's statement was released, Secretary Chodoro categorically denied China's claim, noting that the Philippines did not agree to any new agreement with Beijing on Ayungin. Chodoro says, any insinuation that the Defense Department is a party to any new model is a devious machination of China through their embassy in Manila. He adds that it's, quote, curious that China's statement came right after their recent actions were condemned in his recent meeting with U.S. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin and their counterparts in Japan and Australia in Hawaii. National Security Advisor Ed Año also denied China's claims, calling it a fake news and an act of pathetic desperation. In a statement, Año said no one in the Philippine government has been authorized by the president to enter into or commit to any sort of agreement, understanding, or arrangement, more so informal ones. On One News Historicon, National Security Council Jonathan Malaya echoed Año's statement, noting that any agreement without the approval of the president has no force or effect. He adds that China's claims are just a distraction.
Kung may kinakausap man siguro ang China, baka naman tenyente lang to or kapitan. You have to be talking to the right people.
Yeah.
Okay?
The higher ups. Yeah.
The people who have the authority, who can really speak for the Philippine government. And in this case, they did not speak to anyone who has that authority. And again, this is all part of the Chinese propaganda disinformation operations, because this came at the heel of the revelations by the biologists from the UP Institute of Biology na may ginagawa sila dito sa Sandy Cays. Kaya naghanap sila ng issue para matakpan itong environmental degradation that they're doing in Sandy Cays.
The NSC also said that they see no reason to investigate AFP Westcom head Alberto Carlos, as there was no agreement with China to begin with. Mobile Journal Mary Reyes, we are One News.
The Sandy Cays in the Philippines is now in a degraded state. That is according to marine scientist Dr. Jonathan Anticamara from the UP Institute of Biology. He and his team had traveled to the case in March but only just published their findings over the weekend. He says there are now less than 10 coral and fish species per 100 square meters transect in the area, and that species they observed were small in size. The group also discovered rubble piled on case 1, 2, and 3 that are now exposed even during high tide. These piles of sand and rubble have many characteristics atypical of naturally formed coral, and Dr. Anticamara says that the government should be more vigilant about the area.
We need to prioritize monitoring, management. The Filipinos must be vigilant because we already know that around this area, in fact, very close to this Pag-asa case, there are already islands that are man-made, built, in fact, are now fortified as military bases for China.
National Security Council Assistant Director General Jonathan Malaya went so far as to say that the pile of dead coral may be an attempt to reverse the 2016 arbitration ruling.
It's really a big issue for us kasi nga itong Pag-asa Sandy Cays 1, 2, and 3 are located within the 12 nautical miles territorial sea of Pag-asa Island. So pag nabuo yung pinaplano nila to make it into a low tide elevation, no? They're trying to change the physical characteristics of that island. Ang plano nila dyan is gawing isang artificial island as well, where they will compute whatever alleged supposed maritime entitlements they would want, and in effect reverse the 2016 arbitral ruling. Malalim din sila mag-isip at magaling.
Dr. Anticamara says the degraded state of the Sandy Cays corals could be due to overfishing and climate change as well. But apparently, the pile of rubble on the case, on top of living coral, is purely man-made and is commonly found during reclamation activities. Malaya says all this information that they're gathering may form part of another case that they are considering to file against China.
All of this information that we're getting will be brought to the Department of Justice in the Office of the Solicitor General, because they're the ones studying the filing of additional cases against the People's Republic of China. Nakakadami na tayo ng ebidensya, kinakalat na natin yan. At the same time, nagbigay din ng direktiba si NSA, si National Security Advisor Eduardo Año, for more patrols in the West Philippine Sea, particularly in the Bajo de Masinloc area. Rotational yan and more patrols. Hopefully, ma-fast track yung delivery ng mga additional Coast Guard vessels coming from Japan. There's 5 on the line para yung presence natin mabantayan natin.
Last month, we had a report on this actually. We zoomed into the Sandy Cays and how critical it is in the whole ecosystem of the Pag-asa Islands and our claims around that area. If they are able to establish a feature there that does not submerge underwater, then it does generate a 12 nautical mile territorial
So,
sea.
sa
And
madaling salita, they can just keep dumping these corals, let's say, tapos kahit high tide, kita mo pa rin siya on
At yung
top.
Pag-asa natin is just 4 kilometers away, 3 to 4 kilometers away. Very, very near. That territorial sea will encompass Subi and will encompass Pag-asa. Therefore, there will be overlapping claims in
I mean,
that
you
area.
saw it for yourself. You joined that research trip,
I
right?
did join that research trip, and I was actually doing some research a while ago, and I saw a column written by Justice Carpio where he said that back in 2017 there was debate over whether China had seized the Sandy Cays. So that made me wonder if that was the reason why before we were able to reach the Sandy Cay 2, it was actually heavily guarded by Chinese vessels. So yun yung tanong, no? It is within our territorial sea ng Pag-asa, but I wonder if there was something that happened there back in 2017.
Actually, you came back and were telling us about the pile of dead
Yes.
coral now, which
Yeah.
you found was pretty odd as well. Mataas, diba?
Sobrang
Mataas,
taas,
mas
sobrang
mataas
laki.
siya sa tao.
Yeah.
So nakita naman natin doon sa video na yung sa ilalim, parang malayo yung itsura niya. Parang talagang tinambak doon kasi puti, tapos yung corals na submerged. Medyo
Yan.
buhay pa, pero
We're
degraded
actually,
na.
in case you're
ito
wondering
na
what
yun.
Gretchen's talking about, you're seeing it now on your screen. So malaki siya. This is, I guess
That's
to give
me.
you,
That's
that's
me
Gretchen's
walking
feet
on it.
and her pants. And so ganun kalaki, no, yung area na kumbaga, so-called na dump itong mga coral
Kasi
reefs.
pulverized corals yung ginamit ng China for Subi Reef.
Right.
Right, to reclaim that area.
Okay.
But that one does not generate a territorial sea.
Yeah.
This one will
Could.
generate.
This one could if you
generate.
pile them high enough.
High enough
Remember
na-
also that last year, there were crushed coral that was found also on Sandy Cay 2.
Right, that
And,
was in September of last year.
Then we have maritime expert Attorney J. Batongbakal agreeing with Secretary Malaya, saying that the deliberate alteration of the marine environment could be the basis of a follow-up case to the UN tribunal. Listen to this.
Itong destruction ng coral, no? And deliberate alteration ng marine environment, pwede maging basehan yun, no? Ng isa pang kaso na pa-follow up dun sa 2016 arbitration. Mahalagang punto to kasi nga, nung time ng arbitration, hindi pa yan napapansin.
Remember back also when they conducted the research there, the team was injured in that trip after a Chinese Navy helicopter flew very low and hovered over them as they inspected the corals, sending the rocks
Flying all
straight
into the researchers.
into their bodies. And sabi nga, no, kasi because the vessels can't go near to the Sandy Cays, very shallow water. So yun yung parang line of defense nila, yung helicopters.
Oh.
And
That's a
siguro
very
that's
good
the
point.
only way they could kind of like detract the researcher, or at least distract them from what they were doing, perhaps. So
But let me just point out that this has taken a very serious turn now, because for Secretary Malaya to accuse China of, plotting to turn that into a low tide elevation, into a low tide feature, thereby changing the 2016 ruling or potentially reversing the ruling, is a very serious allegation. So parang it's just taken a serious turn. All
There's
this
an article
tit for tat.
by Bloomberg that says that this might have been done by Vietnam, But the PCG Commodore J. Tariela said that in the past years, and the team of media men was witness to this, that there were no other vessels apart from the Chinese vessels in the area. Kasi may iba nagsabi baka mga Vietnamese yun. yung
Yes, may
gumawa nun.
lumabas nga na gano'n, no? I think that was in March when that research trip happened. They were saying, oh, let's not be hasty to blame China kasi it could be Vietnam. But I think there's enough radar and enough people monitoring that area to be able to say which boats were hanging out around there.
Well, in other news, amid the relentless heat, President Marcos himself says it's high time to bring back the old school calendar. Is that good news? Well, Marian Enriquez has the story.
Due to the intense heat, over 7,300 schools nationwide are implementing alternative delivery modes or teaching students through online platforms or modules. That's according to data from the Education Department. Nica's 2 elementary school-age children in Quezon City are among the affected students and have been doing modular learning at home for 3 weeks now.
Puro bahay lang po. Puro send sa GC, yung mga gagawin po nila. Then ipiprint mo kasi may mga summative test. Yung summative test, yun, ipiprint kasi papasa po sa school bukas.
The problem is, Nika also has a job dividing her attention between her kids and her work. If it were up to her, she would prefer to revert to the old school calendar, with children starting school in June so they could have their vacation during the hot and dry months. Nika's wish seems to have reached the president's ears. Today, President Bongbong Marcos himself pushed to revert to June to March academic calendar.
Hopefully by next year, yes. With the El Nino being what it is, F2F classes are cancelled, F2F classes have been postponed, etc. So talagang kailangan na. I think it will be better for the kids.
The House of Representatives has also adopted a resolution urging the Education Department to revert to the previous calendar for students from kindergarten to senior high school.
Sobrang init. And because of that hindi ho magpropromote ng quality education yun. Kawawa rin po yung learner.
According to DepEd, they are ready to immediately follow the president's directive. In fact, they claim to have submitted 4 proposals to the palace on how to revert to the previous school calendar. One of their proposals includes the aggressive option of ending the school year in March 2025 so that classes can start in June next year.
Now that the president has made the statement earlier, tayo naman po sa department, as we said, we will abide by the decision of the president on the matter. We will just await advice from the office of the president if there will be a meeting or if any presentation is necessary.
If the aggressive option pushes through, students would only have 165 school days in the upcoming school year, which is lower than the mandated 180 days. However, the 2-month vacation for teachers would still be complete. The Teachers Dignity Coalition is in favor with this option, as long as teachers won't have to conduct classes during the hot season again.
Yung extreme heat, no, kasi marami sa ating mga teacher natin, 40s, no, above 40s, no. So medyo may mga iniinda na din ito ng mga karamdaman, no. Doon sa aming survey, no, ang top, no, na reklamo ng mga guro ay yung high blood, no, yung pagkahilo, no, pagsakit ng ulo.
For News 5, Marian Enriquez, we are One News.
Well, up next, 2 more bridges along EDSA will be closed this year to make way for repairs. We'll ask DPWH Secretary Manuel Bonoan about what the plan is to make sure they don't worsen the already heavy traffic. Keep it here on One News.
Welcome back. You're still watching The Big Story here on One News.
Motorists traversing EDSA fear that the traffic might just get heavier. Because not one but two more bridges along the major thoroughfare are set to be closed to repairs this year. Gerard De La Peña has all the details on that. Tell us more, Gerard.
Reg, though repairs along the southbound lane of the Kamuning flyover have yet to be completed, 3 more bridges are also scheduled for closure later this year, also to make way for repairs. This month, the Magallanes flyover is targeted to be closed for repairs. Bridge reinforcement will be added underneath the flyover to strengthen it. The budget for its rehabilitation is up to over 200 million pesos. Authorities say repairs could take at least 6 months. But until now, there is no exact date on when it will begin. Despite this, motorists will still be able to access the Magallanes interchange.
Gusto namin kasing hindi magsabay ang pagsasara with Kamuning flyover. Kaya ang unahin namin sa Magallanes flyover, southbound, ay yung paglalagay muna ng mga carbon fiber sheet.
Meanwhile, before end 2024, repair works will also be done simultaneously on the Guadalupe Bridge in Makati and the Lambingan Bridge right at the boundary of Manila and Mandaluyong. The bridges will undergo almost a major overhaul as there is a lot that needs to be repaired. The Guadalupe Bridge is now 6 years old, and since 2012, the Japan International Cooperation Agency or JICA has been recommending the retrofitting of the Guadalupe Bridge after spotting cracks on its foundations. Authorities say they will strengthen the bridges in preparation for the big one or the forecasted large earthquake that could hit Metro Manila.
Hindi naman daw po masasara totally ang Guadalupe Bridge, at aside po dun magagawa din sila ng detour bridges sa upstream at downstream portion para po hindi ganon ka-traffic kapag po ginawa ang Guadalupe Bridge.
But motorists are not convinced.
Sobrang traffic din, sir, lalo. Mahirapan na kami paikot-ikot yan, lalo na ako. Pag ikot-ikot ako saan dadaan.
Earlier today, heavy traffic has been observed on the southbound lane of EDSA Kamuning as repairs on the Kamuning flyover are underway. Reg, to ease the traffic, the MMDA continues to conduct clearing operations on alternate routes such as Sergeant Esguerra Avenue. Just this morning, 17 have received violation tickets for illegal parking on the alternate route. Reg.
Thanks for that update, Gerard De La Peña.
And here to talk to us about these repair works and how the government plans to mitigate the expected heavier traffic along EDSA, we have with us on the line Public Works and Highway Secretary Manuel Bonoan. Magandang gabi po, Secretary.
Magandang gabi po sa ating lahat. Magandang gabi po sa ating taga-subaybay.
Hey, Secretary, repairs for the Kamuning Bridge flyover are underway. Ngayon, dalawa na naman po, Magallanes, pati itong Guadalupe Bridge. What kind of a overhaul are we looking at, and what issues do we currently have when it comes to how strong these flyovers are? Yung Magallanes po tsaka yung Guadalupe.
Well, actually, we have a program of retrofitting all the major structures along EDSA, the flyovers. Magallanes, you mentioned Magallanes flyover and ano pa yung isa? Guadalupe Bridge. Guadalupe Bridge, we need to strengthen yung dalawang adjacent structures, no? Because Guadalupe Bridge, meron yung major structure in the middle, and there are two other structures yung on the sides, no. This has to be repaired. And Magallanes flyover, we need to replace actually yung longitudinal expansion joint, which is worn out actually. Nonetheless, what we are saying is actually that we need to finish muna sana substantially yung Kamuning flyover project that we're undertaking right now before we start any of these two other projects, eventually the later part of this year.
Okay. I guess, Secretary Bonoan, yung kinakatakutan ng mga tao, as usual, bonggang-bonggang traffic pag magsara nga itong mga flyover natin. Meron na po ba tayong, kumbaga, task force or have we created some sort of working group to figure out new alternate routes, or are we just going to use the usual, yung mga mabuhay lanes that are already existing?
Ganito po yan. Before we start any project along EDSA, we have to coordinate with the Metropolitan Development Authority because they are the one in charge of managing the traffic. This is fully coordinated with them to take charge of the rerouting and yung traffic management if we are going to close parts of these structures actually. So parang yung dito sa Kamuning Flyover, this has been well coordinated with the MMDA, who is now doing the traffic management in that area. Now, our project in the Kamuning Flyover is that we are replacing actually the southbound slab carriageway of that flyover. Schedule namin is actually, as I understand, is up to October this year, but we will try to expedite the implementation of the works on this slab so that in the shortest possible time, because we did not wait until October to finish it. We'll take advantage of the good weather conditions prevailing right now. But then it still is going to be a little more work to be done there. After that, traffic can go on top of the structure while we are doing some of the retrofitting works underneath the bridge. It may not cause up to the traffic sa baba. With that, after the slab repair, we might start yung replacement of yung sa Magallanes flyover expansion joint because this is imposing danger to motorists already, so need to do this quickly also.
Secretary Bonoan, I'm just wondering why these repair works, and these are major thoroughfares, why they had to be done all at the same time. For instance, for Guadalupe Bridge, as we just reported, JICA, which is funding the project, had actually, I'm sorry, not funding, but JICA, the Japan Cooperation Agency, had recommended that it be retrofitted as far back as 2012, so 12 years ago. Why are we only doing it now, and why all at the same time with the other repairs?
There are many other preparations actually that we have to do actually yung design work, so we have to prepare for the budget. We need to prepare the coordinate with local governments and actually MMDA for the rerouting of the traffic management. It took us some time actually to start the project, but the implementation of Guadalupe Bridge may be implemented towards the latter part of this year actually.
But we never considered, for instance, staggering the repair works, for instance, Guadalupe first and then Magallanes flyover, just to head off the main complaint, which is going to be heavier traffic in those areas, right?
We're not going to do it simultaneously actually. We'll see to it that these are properly coordinated with the Metropolitan Development Authority. We're not going to start any project unless the Metropolitan Development Authority will tell us actually that we can start actually.
Okay,
So this is fully coordinated with the MMDA.
Okay. Secretary Bonoan, just to confirm the timelines again, we already know that Kamuning is scheduled to end on October 25 or around 6 months. Your office has also said that the Magallanes repairs will take about 6 months, but the Guadalupe Bridge retrofitting will take around a little bit longer, or around 3 years. Can you confirm that these are how long?
More or less, but the Guadalupe Bridge is more on the underneath structures that will be repaired actually. Yung underneath structures of Guadalupe Bridge will be the ones to be retrofitted and strengthened actually.
Meaning to say, Secretary, makakadaan pa rin yung mga kotse sa taas?
I think so, but we will of course schedule actually yung baka yung light vehicles lang muna while we are doing actually yung underneath structures actually.
Okay, Secretary, doon po sa report ni Gerard de la Peña na banggit po niya magkakaroon ng parang upstream, downstream na daanan dito sa may Guadalupe Bridge. Are you going to construct other lanes to be able to accommodate while it's under construction?
We'll see. Yung alternate structures muna, yung nasabi siguro, for that, no? Para maibsan lang yung traffic. We are planning actually to do that actually.
Would this be similar, Secretary Bonoan, to the proposal of former DPWH Secretary Mark Villar? Nung time kasi po niya, meron siyang sinasabi na kumbaga may dalawang temporary lanes on either side, northbound, isa doon sa southbound, na parang gaganon sa gilid daw nung existing bridge. Yung po ba yung pinag-uusapan natin right now? Or is it a different workaround?
It is more or less the same actually, but we will do it on a sequence actually. Siguro, firstly, yung southbound muna, and then we will transfer to the northbound.
Okay.
Para hindi naman maging simultaneous ang trabaho, para hindi masyadong maapektuhan yung traffic dyan sa area na yan.
Secretary Bonoan, dun po sa study ng JICA, meron po silang na-identify na 43 critical bridges in NCR that may be affected by the big one. After po nung tatlo, yung Magallanes, Camuning at Guadalupe, ano pa po yung tinitingnan po nating will be under repair?
Yes. These are all identified, and actually mga major structures like there are other flyovers actually along EDSA, and actually these are also going to be retrofitted. No, I hope that many of these structures we will be undertaking it with non-destructive methods. Kasi kagaya niyang for as long as the carriageway are still found to be strong enough, then yung retrofitting works namin na gagawin siguro will be underneath structures with yung non-destructive methods like using carbon fiber. Yung mga ganong issues lang, no? But these are going to be all scheduled in sequence actually. Para hindi ma-disrupt masyado ang traffic along it.
But at least for this year, how many more are you looking to do? How many more projects?
For this year, I think if at all, actually, we will start with the Guadalupe Bridge, the foreign assisted project, towards the latter part of this year. And then, of course, yung Magallanes, for as long as we are able to come up with the rerouting plan. Madali lang naman siguro yung it will not be totally closed, I understand, kasi yung papalitan lang naman doon sa actually yung expansion drains actually.
Here's to hoping that traffic won't be brutal and that everything's been sorted out. Maraming salamat po para sa inyong oras ngayong gabi, DPWH Secretary Manuel Bonoan.
Alright, break muna tayo. But right after the commercial break, President Bongbong Marcos wants amendments to the rice tarification law certified as urgent to bring down rice prices. We'll be discussing this further when we return. Keep it here.
Marcus, so watching the big story here on One News.
Proposals to amend the rice tarification law, or RTL, are all set to receive urgent certification from President Bongbong Marcos. Shyla Francisco with that report.
President Bongbong Marcos is looking to certify as urgent the proposed amendments to the rice tarification law in an effort to bring down rice prices.
I think it justifies an urgent certification. Ang problema kasi, kaya tumataas ang presyo ng bigas dahil ang mga trader ay nagko-compete. Pataasan sila ng presyuhan sa pagbili ng palay. At wala tayong control doon. Kung magkaroon ng mga amendments sa NFA at sa rice tarification, sa NFA charter at saka sa rice tarification law, magagawa natin, makokontrol natin, meron tayong influence dun sa presyuhan, sa pagbili ng palay at sa pagbenta ng bigas.
Signed into law back in 2019, the rice tarification law lifted quantitative restrictions on rice and introduced tariffs. Around 10 billion pesos collected from rice tariffs also goes to the Rice Competitiveness Enhancement Fund, which supports farmers. Under the law, the National Food Authority was also stripped of its mandate to buy and sell rice at a cheaper price. What's left is their function to regulate the country's buffer stock. Amid the current proposals to bring back the NFA's old mandate, the Department of Agriculture tempered expectations, saying the price of NFA rice won't be the same as before. If before you can buy NFA rice for as low as 27 pesos per kilo, now the lowest the agency can go might be at 40 pesos.
Nasa pag-aaral din nila na yung gastusin ng NFA magmula doon sa pamimili nila, pag-store, pag-dry, pag-meal, umaabot yan mga 37 to 39 pesos per kilo. So, win-win solution ito na tingin ng ating kagawaran na hindi nalulugi ang NFA. At the same time, mas mura yung bigas, relatively lower than the prevailing market price. Gusto lang natin ay mapag-aralan kung ano yung presyo na hindi rin malulugi ang NFA at makakapagbigay din yung ating pamahalaan ng murang bigas.
Amendments to the rice tarification law are being discussed in the lower house, with no less than Speaker Martin Romualdez leading the push. Agriculture groups, meanwhile, are hoping for a comprehensive study on what the proposed amendments will mean for stakeholders. They're also hoping for amendments that would empower the NFA on its mandate to inspect and regulate stocks in order to prevent hoarding and profiteering. Shyla Francisco, VR One News.
Here to talk more about this, we have with us tonight via Zoom former Agriculture Secretary Leonardo Montemayor, who is also chairman of the Federation of Free Farmers. Mr. Montemayor, good evening. Thanks for being with us.
Good evening, good evening, ma'am, and good evening to our viewers.
Okay, first off, I wanted to get your reaction on the report that we just ran. President Marcos saying amending the charter of the NFA and making all the amendments to the RTL, rice tarification law, will give the government enough leeway to control the prices of rice as they begin to go up. Your reaction, please.
Yes, we're quite pleased that the President sees the urgency of reviewing the effectiveness of the rice tarification law. The original intentions of that law, which was passed back in February of 2019, were basically two. Number one is to make rice more affordable to our consumers. And number two, to improve the productivity and incomes of our rice farmers. Based on our own studies, the RTL so far has failed on both major objectives. Number one, alam po natin nung just before the RTL took effect, there was this rice crisis in the middle part of 2018. Before the crisis hit us, the prices po of rice nasa kwan po 38 pesos per kilo. It's now between 50 to 60 pesos per kilo. Yan po ay a 30 to 50% increase compared to the price of 38 in 2019. In the past few months alone, ang rice inflation po ay umakyat po by more than 20%.
Correct.
So clearly, hindi po nagtagumpay ang RTL with respect to making rice more affordable to our ordinary consumers. In the case po ng ating farmers' income, Ang estimate po natin ay ang nawala po sa ating mga magsasaka, at least during the first 4 years of RTL, on a per hectare basis was about 10,000 pesos per hectare. So kung ikaw nagtatanim ng 2 beses sa taon, ang nawala pong income mo ay 20,000 pesos. That's big for a typical rice farmer. And in terms of productivity, hindi naman gaanong lumaki ang productivity levels po natin. Kaya talagang every year I notice from 90% self-sufficiency in rice, this was just before RTL, I think we're now down to 77% self-sufficiency. So clearly, again, the way the RCEF was spent and the way the programs were implemented, I think were not properly undertaken.
All right. With regard, Secretary Montemayor, doon sa specific role ng NFA no, na pinaliit nitong RTL, which is to maintain a rice buffer stock, I understand the FFF has already made recommendations to Congress no, about amending the RTL. But with regard to NFA, marami po kasing divided sa issue na yon. Should the NFA go back to regulating our rice buffer stock or not, in your opinion?
I think with respect to the buffer stocking role of the NFA, kailangan pong ipagpatuloy po yan. Kasi kailangan naman talaga natin na meron tayong reserba na bigas para makapagbigay po tayo ng relief o ayuda sa mga biktima po ng kalamidad. And that is set, I think, by the NFA at 9-day supply. So I think that particular role or mandate should be kept. Now, with respect to, kasi meron pong mga ibang nagbumungkahi ngayon na ibalik daw yung pamimili po ng NFA ng bigas, not for buffer stocking, pero upang maibenta po yan sa abot-kayang halaga sa mga kababayan po natin na nangailangan. I think that has to be carefully treated and acted upon. Kasi siguro kung magkakaroon po tayo ng direct subsidy po sa ating mga poor consumers, malamang mas maganda pong approach is targeted. Because previously the cheaper NFA rice, let's say 27 pesos before, and any consumer could buy it, whether you are in the middle class or you are in the poorest sector or even the upper classes, pare-pare pong pwedeng makabili at 27. I think it's better to limit any subsidy program for consumers to the neediest Filipinos. At sila lang po makakatanggap. Halimbawa, pwede pong gamitin dyan food stamps. Tapos yun pong gagamitin ng mga may hawak ng food stamps para makabili po ng mas murang bigas po sa NFA. So I think if there will be any subsidy to be given for consumers, it has to be a targeted one.
Mr. Montemayor, you talked about the farmers' income decreasing by 10,000 pesos per hectare, yet the tariffs were designed to be able to increase productivity and competitiveness of rice here in the Philippines. What do you think are the major flaws of the rice tarification law, apart from the role of the NFA?
Well, yung una dyan, Gretchen, yung kasi ang isang malaking problema talaga under RTL, rice importation and business was open to the private sector. Government totally withdrew except for the buffer stocking of the NFA. So unfortunately, during the initial 4 years, grabe yung pagpasok ng imported rice. If I remember correctly, on a yearly basis kasi, dapat talaga inangkat lang natin mga 2 million metric tons of rice. Under RTL, halos matudoble po yung pumapasok na imported rice. So much so, our country became the number 1 or number 2 top rice importing country in the world. So, siyempre, ang effect ng malaking volume po ng imported rice na pumapasok, lalo na kung mura ito, talagang babagsak yung presyo po ng palay. At sumabay pa naman yung pagpasok ng maraming bigas sa panahon po ng anihan. So sana po ginagamit ngayon ng tama, meron naman po kasing provision sa batas yung tinatawag na safeguard measures. Under that, government can impose additional tariffs in order to prevent or to discourage further imports from coming in. That was never used, despite the fact that it is a WTO, compliant measures. So, yan po, hindi po nagkaroon na po ng karampatang proteksyon ang ating mga magsasaka. With respect to the other components of the RCEF, maganda naman po yung idea na yung tariff collections or revenue from the importation of rice that goes into a fund. It's called the Rice Competitiveness Enhancement Fund, or RCEF. And that RCEF is used now to provide modern farm equipment, provide good seeds, to provide training and credit to our rice farmers. Again, it was a good idea, but yung pong implementation po, marami pong problema. Kaya dapat pong repasuhin po kung paano mapapabuti po yung implementation po ng pondo sa ilalim po ng RCEF. And we are also suggesting na magdagdag po ng bagong items sa menu. For example, yung kailangan po siguro dito yung ipasok po yung solar-powered irrigation systems and water impounding, especially for rain-fed rice areas, so that we can withstand the effects of climate change, especially El Nino, much better. And then the whole idea of providing budgets also for post-harvest facilities. Ang laki kasi nang nawawala po sa ating production po ng palay at bigas from the wastage alone. Di ba? Pinatutuyo lang po yung palay sa mga national highways po natin. Ang nawawala po dyan, anywhere from 10 to 15% of our production because of the lack of post-harvest facilities. Of course, lack of irrigation is also a major factor.
There's a lot of problems, definitely, and you're right. The law is well-meaning, but it always comes down to the execution and the implementation. We're gonna have to leave that there for tonight. Thanks so much for sharing your thoughts with us, Federation of Free Farmers Chairman Leonardo Montemayor.
In the world of sports, Bianca Bustamante is officially on board as she picked up her first podium of the 2024 F1 Academy season, finishing in P2 for race 2 in Miami. In what was a relatively strong weekend for the McLaren driver, Bustamante qualified second for race 2 and managed to hold on to the position, fighting off Mercedes' Dorian Pin. Bianca finished behind Abby Pulling as the Alpine driver won her third consecutive race. The Filipina driver's P2 for race 2 was a strong bounce back after her P9 finish back in race 1. Bustamante is currently fifth in the standings with 39 points. The next round of the F1 Academy season will be in Barcelona in June.
All right, and for our big picture tonight, we go all the way to South America because there is some devastating news coming out of Brazil where severe flooding has left dozens dead. You're now seeing photos from the town of Canoas in southern Brazil, with entire homes submerged in muddy waters. The death toll has hit 78, while thousands remain stranded in shelters or on top of their homes, waiting to be rescued.
Well, here's hoping rescue does come quickly. That makes it 3 or 4 days now that we've ended on a picture that's related to climate change. My pet advocacy. But yes, but as Mr. Montemayor was talking about, even here, as close to home as the Philippines, agriculture is such a huge issue, right? Just the whole point of trying to bring down the price of rice. It's not as simple as saying, let's throw money at it, let's provide more fertilizers, let's open up the gates to importation and so on and so forth. As we heard that he was just talking about, there's always trade-offs, right? And it's complicated. And there's also climate change complicating the issue as well. We need better irrigation systems. We need more fertilizers. We need more technology. Correct. More climate resilient technology. We need consistent energy that's cheaper, right? Stable energy.
Even solar power, you need to manage.
You need to manage it
the
because
circular economy of that, how to recycle the panels.
Even
as you use
even
it.
the using land use for solar panels vis-a-vis farmlands, problems of the 21st century, certainly.
Yeah, and then also, again, of course, we're talking about heat indices, right? We've been talking about it for many, many
50,
weeks now.
50,
and tomorrow.
today,
and
yes.
tomorrow, that's right. That's a number that we never thought we'd see.
Hit. Yeah.
Heat index of 50%. Again, heat index factors in humidity, but those are not numbers that were, normal once upon a time. But they are today.
Today.
We're talking about it today, almost every day. It's 45, 46, 47, and now 50.
Definitely, I'll tell you one thing, it came a lot sooner than everyone thought it would.
And the
Yes.
good news is that it's not too late to reverse it. As scientists have mentioned, we are at the critical point where we still can do something about it, like
But
restore
as the
forests.
DPWH Secretary has said, and also former Secretary Montemayor, and Regina herself, we can have really good ideas.
I wish I were a
We
scientist,
execute.
but
But if we don't
Implementation.
execute
It's
these
implementation.
ideas,
it comes down to
implementation
the
and enforcement.
execution, because the laws are there, the technology are there. As Secretary Montemayor was saying, there is a safeguard provision, for instance, in the rice tarification law that prevents the importers from abusing it. So why has no one ever triggered it? Right? It was
overlooked. That's what she
he
said.
was just literally saying you were supposed to import 2 million metric tons, naging doble. Why was that provision never triggered?
So
Right?
many foods were thought, and you know what, guys? It's only Monday. Unfortunately, that's all the time
long
we have.
list. Getting me riled up on a Monday.
On a Monday, we have the rest of the week. Join us again tomorrow. But for tonight, that's it for the big
Let's
story.
talk more about solutions here on this show. We are One News, all sides, all the time.
That's a good way to look at it. Thanks for tuning in. Have a good night.